To ring in the new year, we're taking on a challenge. Can my dad make 4 healthy dishes from start to finish in under 50 minutes?
我個問題有啲咩呢？糙米同埋白米煮個飯，呢個係腰果雞嚟嘅，豆腐蛋花湯嚟嘅，蒜蓉西芥蘭花啊，一個飯3樣，一個湯2樣餸啊。
Wait, 3, 2, 1, go.
OK， 而家呢就開始洗米煮飯先嚇。隻米煮飯呢個係呢個量杯1杯米嚟嘅嚇。
In most of our cooking videos, we trim a lot of footage, but to make this challenge more realistic and also approachable for you to recreate for yourself, we're not going to edit out any of the footage or pause the timer on our cute kid's iPad, even if our portable stove runs out of gas or even if I have to adjust cameras. We started this challenge in large part thanks to our collaboration with Asian Health Services, a community health center based in Oakland, California, which currently serves over 50,000 patients across 14 different languages. If you're like me and had to translate complex medical conversations for your parents as a young kid, you'll know why Asian Health Services is so vital to the immigrant community.
係一杯量杯6安士嘅糙米，6一半糙米一半白米。
So 2杯。
2杯米呢度。
If you're wondering why we're mixing white rice and brown rice, it's actually the first of 7 simple but impactful tweaks that we'll be uncovering in this video to live a healthier, longer life. I got to sit down with Asian Health Services' Susan Lau, a family medicine doctor of over 27 years, to explain why this simple change is so consequential.
You know, white rice is it's actually a refined grain because it's been pearled or peeled off itself, has very little nutritional value.
因為啲糙米咧就比較時間長啲，我今日咧就俾4杯水。4杯水嗱，睇2杯4。
We're also wanting people to try things like whole grain barley, whole grain millet, whole grain quinoa, right? So all those different types of grains are actually much, much healthier for you nutrition-wise than white rice. To even step up even more, you could even add a little lentils, a little extra fiber, a little extra protein. You're stunting your rise in blood sugar. You'll feel fuller because of the protein and the fiber that you're getting from the rice. And you don't have to eat as much.
而家撳掣煮飯嗬。
咁你咁等幾耐先？
煮到啲飯煮15分鐘先要再俾啲白米落去。
To highlight this subtle pro tip, my dad is cooking the brown rice for 15 minutes first before adding the white rice so that the 2 different types of grains finish cooking with the same ideal texture.
煮緊飯呢個時候咧，就應該切呢個豆腐。
We'll rinse 1 pound of soft tofu with cold water and cut it into large cubes.
蛋花湯啊，豆腐蛋花湯嚟㗎，呢個係1塊豆腐。
It seems like you have a lot of expertise with like food and nutrition. So how did you get into that and why is it so important to you?
I've always loved food. My undergraduate major at Cal was actually in nutrition and food science.
For my short time working with Susan, it's pretty obvious that healthy nutrition is something she really lives, breathes, and preaches. What wasn't as obvious, since Susan is so humble, is how much of her passion she's devoted to Asian Health Services and leadership within our community. After some digging on the AHS YouTube channel, I found that Susan spent at least a decade volunteering her time to organize initiatives like run clubs and prenatal classes for immigrant moms to help them navigate pregnancy in a new country.
As a family medicine doctor, I see patients from when they're pregnant to when they give birth to when someone's 100 years old. And the nutrition basically is required for their entire lifespan, even before they're actually born, because what mom eats before she gives birth is really important to the health of the baby as she's developing the fetus. Being a doctor, I realize the choices people make with the food they choose to eat really affects their life. The amount of people who are dying from chronic diseases, it's usually due to poor diet choices.
Susan's point ties into the Trojan horse of this video. Maybe you clicked on this challenge video to see if my dad could bang out 4 dishes in under 50 minutes, but our bigger hope is that you finish this video feeling inspired to make simple tweaks to your diet to live a longer, healthier life. Here we're slicing 2 ounces of carrots into strips, then into small cubes.
I think one overarching theme when we met in person was treating diseases before they occur. Can you talk about that?
So as a doctor, we often see patients after they already have a diagnosis like diabetes or heart disease. But in fact, most of those diseases started a long time ago. And some relate to really poor nutrition or improper nutrition, I guess. And I would say after being a doctor for a number of years, I realized, well, we have an opportunity to try to catch these people as early as possible, right? first line treatment for all those things. It's always diet, lifestyle modification, and exercise. It's very hard to make a big change, but it's not hard to make incremental change, right? So getting back to basics of getting in your kitchen and cooking instead of eating fast food. Or if you're already cooking, how do you cook a little healthier? So just small little steps can actually move the dial a little bit closer to health.
To summarize, for the cashew chicken, we're using about 12 ounces of chicken breast. We'll cut the thickest part of the chicken breast in half horizontally, then we'll cut bite-sized pieces diagonally across the grain. Here's a clip from one of our courses on working with meat grain.
譬如呢嚿肉咁點樣揾到咩叫做紋路呢？肉眼睇到嘅，佢有啲紋喺度，啲肉紋喺度。
They do not cross directions, and the trick is to look for the thin white lines of fat in between the muscle fibers.
一般我哋切肉嘅時候呢，肉紋係咁樣落，我哋用刀嘅時候呢，就打橫咁樣切，叫切橫紋嘅。嚿肉食起上嚟呢，就唔會韌啦。如果你順住呢個紋咁一片片切呢，咬起上嚟呢，就會有啲口感，有啲覺得佢韌，就所以話一定要揾到個肉紋先嚟切嗰嚿肉。
If you want more clips like this on cooking techniques, click the link in our description.
又可以咁樣切，咁片。 切到之後醃佢。要擺㗎嘛？俾少少生粉，一個茶匙，一個湯匙生粉，醃佢。
If you want to follow along with a fully written recipe, check out our blog at maywithlao.com.
擺個碗喺個中間。
少少糖。
幾多啊？
半個茶匙，鹽糖。少啲胡椒粉上去。一個茶匙，一個湯匙水，開咗水就撈佢。
While we mix the slurry into the chicken, Cantonese dishes rely heavily on starches to control texture and moisture and trap flavors when marinating meat. However, the body treats starch a lot like pure sugar, which can potentially lead to blood sugar spikes. That said, we are adding a relatively small amount of cornstarch here, around 1 tablespoon or 8 grams, which is a typical amount in most of my dad's stir fries. It's just important to be mindful of how much cornstarch you're using and how much food you're consuming in general.
俾多半個茶匙上去撈佢。
點解而家先加啊？
一樣係一樣啫嘛，頭先嘅俾嗱。
你攞得越多啲啊？
咁你撈嗰啲雞肉咧，佢就滑好多啦。撈嗰啲雞肉，佢啲雞肉煮起上嚟佢就滑啦知唔知啊？
Notice how my dad is gently massaging the meat. This is another subtle thing my dad does to help the meat absorb flavor. Another subtle pro tip you might miss and are about to see is to keep a bowl of water around and a towel or rag on hand. Next up, we'll cut the vegetables for the cashew chicken dish.
呢個時候咧，切咗個雞呢個肉雞片。
Cut 2 ounces of carrot on a diagonal into segments. Now we'll lay the segments down on the flat side and cut them into 1/4-inch thick slices. This is a stylistic choice, but my dad tends to match the shape of the vegetables to the shape of the primary ingredient. For cashew chicken, he's doing thin vegetable slices to pair with thin chicken slices. For a dish like chow mein, he tends to cut veggies into long strips to pair with long noodles, and for a dish like fried rice, he tends to mince ingredients to pair with the bits of rice. Next, we'll cut the celery into 1/2-inch thick slices on a diagonal. For faster, safer cutting, you need to understand the claw grip. Basically, think of holding your ingredient with your hands shaped like a claw, so that your fingertips are protected from the sharp edge of the knife by your knuckles. Your fingertips kind of crawl like a caterpillar across the ingredient as you cut it, and your knuckles serve as a guide for the flat side of the knife. If you want to develop your knife skills further, we also have an entire course on this linked in our description.
6安士嘅西芹，蘑菇有6個安士嗬。
兩樣。
兩樣蘑菇6個安士。
唔知係
撈埋。
撈埋係。
Yeah.
We'll cut all the mushrooms in half.
Can you talk about the ideal ratio of like plant protein, grain?
The ideal plate, and there's actually 2 examples of it. If you look under the USDA.gov site, you have half of that plate being vegetables and fruits, 1/4 of that plate being protein source, and then the other quarter being grain. And it's not very specific unless you read the fine print. My actually favorite plate is the Canadian plate because it's beautiful. Half of it is beautiful, colorful vegetables and fruits. 1/4 of it is your lean protein. So in the picture, there's actually not just meat, like fish and chicken. There's also beans and bean products like tofu and soy milk and nuts and seeds. So those would be your 1/4 of an ideal plate. And the other quarter are your grains. So what are your grains for? Your grains are really for energy because the grains are mostly carbohydrate, but the grains there are not white rice. It's not white bread. It's actually colored grains. So you have your multicolored rice and millet and quinoa. And then you also have your breads that are whole grain breads or pastas that are like a dark color, not a pale color pasta.
Now we're peeling and cutting about 1/2 ounce of garlic, or about 2 to 3 cloves, into thin slices.
I know it's very hard to like always eat like that because Chinese people don't eat from a plate, right? We eat like from a bowl. It's just the concept of this is how much you should be eating might be actually very challenging if you're just used to sitting down or getting a takeout box. Like a takeout box from a Chinese restaurant is like 50% white rice usually, and maybe there's, depending on what you choose to get, right? It might be 50% meat with a little bit of bell peppers or onions or something, right? So it's almost like the opposite of what a healthy meal should look like.
Just to point out, we're not criticizing Chinese restaurants. It's just what most customers want. Most restaurants across all cuisines tend to treat veggies as an afterthought. Again, just be mindful and try to incorporate the second healthy tweak of this video of composing your meals to be 50% veggies and fruits, 25% mixed grains, and 25% proteins.
呢個西芥蘭，我同大家講下，俾啲鹽落去，你浸一浸佢先切嚇，兩個台前鹽啊，啲鹽浸一浸佢，咁樣殺菌嚇，
Soak the broccoli with the florets side down in the salt water.
浸佢先嚇，喺度。再切埋蒜蓉嚇，拍埋啲蒜蓉溝芥蘭嘅嚇，蒜蓉薑蓉。
My dad's smashing and peeling the garlic. Trim off the hard ends, then mince the garlic.
呢個係話蒜蓉炒芥蘭就蒜蓉炒芥蘭啊嘛，啊蒜蓉同配薑蓉咯。
The subtle distinction here is 燻油, which means minced garlic or garlic paste. For cashew chicken, we cut the garlic into slices so the garlic is something you can bite into. Whereas for our broccoli, we're smashing and mincing garlic and ginger, so it's more of a flavor or an essence.
個味道點唔同啊？
分開嚟，通常係炒餸咧就係用片啊。
The ginger is already peeled, now we'll mince it by smashing it with the side of the knife and chopping it, just like we did with cloves of garlic. While we could mince garlic and ginger by first cutting into thin slices, then strips, then mincing, which my dad also does sometimes, by smashing it first, or pak, is not only faster than performing 3 separate types of cuts, it also makes the taste a little more pungent because smashing helps break down more of the membranes in the plant cells. Again, we're wiping down our cutting board and knife with a towel.
做咗呢之後咧，啲西芥蘭都可以切得咯喎啊！
This is more of a behind the scenes thing, but since I am monitoring 4 different cameras all by myself, the cutting board is what I use to center all of my shots. And occasionally, I have to move plates and bowls out of the way.
切芥蘭嘅時候，嗱嗱，
Now we'll bring back the broccoli and cut off the florets starting with the outermost pieces.
點解咁樣切啊？
唔好即係你一個個花出嚟啦嘛，
Next, cut off the thick stem.
仔開佢先，嗱呢啲整開佢先，
Slice the florets into smaller pieces.
唔好喺個面上切落去嚇。
會碎晒，
嗯
係咪？
嗯，
會碎晒。
咁咪得，大嚿嘅咪切一切佢，嗱喺呢度個柄度上前面切落去嚇。
Just to emphasize, notice how my dad isn't cutting to the top, otherwise the florets would flake apart.
好啦。
而家係咪
如果屙落隻嘢就切好晒啦，開始煮湯。
飯嘅未生實？
咩啊？
未生啊？未生實啲啊？
哦，你係。OK，而家就開始
煮啊！
煮湯。
切晒啲啊！
嚇，煮晒啦，
唔使教啲油啲
唔使搞嘢嘅啫，就咁得噶啦，唔使搞梳士嚇。好啦，打埋啲雞蛋先哦。
Next up, we'll crack all the eggs into a bowl. After our eggs are cracked, we'll start to prepare our space for cooking. While we do that, I wanted Susan to elaborate on a point she made earlier in the video.
So just small little steps can actually move the dial a little bit closer to health.
Can you talk about that, what some of those simple tweaks are and the general philosophy on that?
A clinic visit, which I only have like 10 minutes or something to talk to somebody, I really need to know where they're at, right? So your simple tweaks will be starting from where they're at and then see where you can tweak. When somebody's not cooking at all, I think the biggest hurdle is what is it that is the barrier to even cooking? People's lives are really complicated and people are very busy, especially in our immigrant population where they might be working 3 jobs and trying to raise 3 kids. And it's very hard to have time to cook. I would say for that group of patients, maybe you just start with making 1 meal a week and engage your family to help you. And for people who might be already cooking and their doctors say, oh, you need to cut out the fat and the salt and whatever, go back to a plant-forward diet where you emphasize your vegetables and fruits and use the really basic seasoning that impart flavor without lots of sugar and salt and oil. So what are those things? Fresh plants, right? Herbs, garlic, onion, ginger, kind of the staple of Chinese cooking.
好，而家煮湯嚇，煮湯係用5杯水煮嚇。
And I think that's why your dad's videos are so powerful because he uses those very basic ingredients for most of his dishes. And those are things that you could prep way ahead of time, right? You can get a whole onion and chop it up and use it in several meals, or you can mince a whole bunch of ginger and use it for several meals, those kind of things.
In most of our videos, typically whenever we switch from cutting to cooking, I stop rolling our cameras, but for the sake of this real-time challenge, I'm just letting it be, even if it's a little more chaotic. We'll cover the pot and bring the water to a boil on high heat.
Can you talk about why it's important to use fresh ingredients?
Most important part is that fresh ingredients taste better. The reason using fresh ingredients at home tastes better so that you don't need to add as much of the added salts and sugars and oils to it, which if you were buying processed food or if you were buying, takeout, if they're not valuing the freshness of the ingredients, how they make things taste better is mouthfeel, right? If they put more oil on it, if they put more salt on it, more sugar on it, then you're tasting that more than the vegetables itself. But every single vegetable has its own unique sweetness and savoriness, and the more fresh you could buy it, the better you're going to enjoy that taste. Not everybody can afford to buy, or have access to a farmer's market, but usually the produce there is the freshest. In California, at least, our patients here have access. If they're on food stamps, they could actually go to the farmer's market here in Chinatown. On the nutritional side, water-soluble vitamins that you get in your fruits and vegetables degrade over time, right? So if you want the highest amount of nutrients in the food that you're taking in, you want the freshest you can get. And also the other side of things, if you buy it really fresh, you could buy more and it'll keep longer in your fridge, right? So if you buy stuff that's kind of on the tail end, you really should eat it right away, and then you'll have to shop more often.
Right. You also save more money.
嚇，啲飯煮你而家加埋啲白米落去嚇。加落嗰啲米之後咧，攪勻佢嚇，攪一攪佢。
We'll stir the rice, close the lid, and let the rice cooker finish its job.
So if you're used to eating white rice, it has a certain texture, has a certain mouthfeel. You could eat it really, really fast, and you could eat a lot of it really, really fast. The problem is it's a refined grain that will shoot your blood sugar up. It'll make you feel happy because, when we have high blood sugar very quickly, you get a dopamine response. You'll want more, but then you'll get hungry. It's a little bit of that Chinese restaurant syndrome. Some people are like, oh, it's from the MSG, it's from this or that, but it's actually from a lot of the refined carbs that you're getting in a Chinese meal at a typical Chinese restaurant, and most of it is from the white rice.
Next, we'll add the carrots, peas, and sweet corn to the pot of water. We're using about 2 ounces of each. In a bit, we'll discard the excess water from the bowl of tofu and gently lower the tofu pieces into the pot and stir the ingredients.
I had one patient, she's pre-diabetic. She was willing to try the brown rice, and she came back to see me months later. It's like, I ate brown rice, but I couldn't eat very much, and I couldn't eat that much the next day. I think something wrong with me. I'm like, no, that's how it's supposed to be. You're not supposed to be eating 2 bowls of white rice. I think a half a bowl of brown rice is completely adequate for your caloric needs.
Now we'll cover the pot again and wait for it to return to a boil. This leads us into our 4th healthy cooking tweak, being mindful of how much starch you're using.
Soups like egg drop soup, which is featured in this video, traditionally uses like 4-5 tablespoons of cornstarch. We'd just love to hear your thoughts on that and substitution.
Well, all starches are basically refined carbohydrates. And cornstarch in particular, you're able to digest and absorb it very, very quickly. And the glycemic index for cornstarch is actually higher than table sugar. In terms of how fast it goes into your bloodstream, how fast it turns into glucose, and how fast that hits your brain. Your brain's fuel is glucose, which is great because that's what makes us think. But we tend to eat more than we use. And that's why obesity is a huge problem in America. A lot of stuff coated in cornstarch or stuff that has a lot high carb and high starch in general are comfort foods. I'm not saying it's necessarily bad, as most things are. It's not completely black and white. But if you're predisposed to having diabetes or you're overweight, when you're trying to make healthy choices, taking out cornstarch or reducing as much as possible will make a difference.
Are there other starches used in the same way that have a lower glycemic index?
Not significantly.
I think just the recommendation is like, don't use it or use less.
Yes, or if you use foods that inherently already has something starchy in it, you could cook it in such a way that it would actually make things a little thicker. The value of that is that you're not adding empty calories.
嗱，而家咧就喺個電爐度煲緊啲水，準備我嚟飛啲菜、啲肉嚟飛水㗎嚇。而家咧呢個湯就去滾㗎啦。啲蛋發一發佢先，發蛋嘅時候咧，你最好就俾少少，俾一個湯匙嘅水上去先至發蛋呵。咁發啲蛋咧，佢就容易發開咗啦。啊，我發開佢，得嘛？用個叉得㗎啦，盡量都發開啲蛋嘅，發開人佢啊。咁化起佢起咗花咁就得啦，睇下。咁樣咧，亦都咧啲蛋打得好開咧，嗰啲蛋花就靚，越嚟越靚啊！啊，睇下幾細好。呢個時候咧，嗰啲生粉水，我用一個湯匙嘅生粉呢個係超級生粉嚟嘅。
平時傳統嘅蛋花湯係用多啲。
係傳統嘅係用多啲嘅多啲生粉嚟嘅生粉，我今次咧就用一個湯匙嘅生粉就得㗎啦。兩個湯匙嘅水開咗佢嚇。
For a starch comparison, we've shared 2 different recipes of egg drop soup. The first recipe calls for 3 tablespoons of cornstarch, and the second recipe calls for 5 tablespoons of potato starch. In contrast, this recipe only calls for 1 tablespoon of potato starch.
兩個湯匙水，呢個 gas 咧就要換 gas 啦，唔夠 gas。
24分鐘啊！24分鐘啊
OK。
This is another small annoying thing about our cooking setup because the portable stove on the island makes for much better videos, but we usually have to change gas canisters in the middle of our shoots.
Oh my gosh.
唔怕，夠時間嚟。
Thankfully, because my dad has so much experience, he can tell almost immediately if the fire isn't strong enough due to an empty gas canister. The water is boiling, so now we'll remove the lid.
好啦，滾啦，滾啦。
Next up, we'll thicken the soup. Give the slurry mixture a stir.
就俾佢生滾水上去。
Pour in the slurry while stirring the pot. Now we'll add flavors to the soup.
跟住咧，俾個茶匙嘅鹽上去，半個茶匙嘅糖，好甜味哦。咁啦，跟住落蛋啦。
你揀嘅方法係咩啊？
啊？
落蛋嘅方法係咩？
慢慢調落去咯。嗱，等先啦，喺呢邊攪嗱，一邊攪一邊啦，喺底下咁發開佢，慢慢發開佢嚇。
係咪你落中火？
係啊。睇到嘛？睇到蛋花兩出嚟啦。
個碟
係啊，嚟得㗎啦。
你再倒下。
嗱你嚇，我試一試嗱。
有時間就
The soup is now ready, so turn off the heat.
OK
Wow, look at this.
OK，
Beautiful.
嚟啊嗱蛋啊
Tofu.
OK 得㗎啦，你可以擺喺度。
We'll set the pot of soup aside and bring over our wok to cook the next dish.
OK，呢個時候咧就將啲飛水。
好嚟啊！
係啊。
Turn the stove on high heat and bring some water to a boil. Another pro tip, remember to start heating the water as you're preparing your food.
你加幾多水啊？
一壺水嘅。
We don't need to be too precise about the amount of water, but more is better for blanching. Anytime you add food to the water, the overall temperature will drop, but it'll drop less drastically if you have more water inside the pot or wok.
先將啲雞肉飛水先嚇。
你點解飛水啊？你平時炒嘢？
通常咧呢個就拉油煮啲雞嘅，我今日就健康唔落咁多油啊，唔用多油就淨飛水啲雞肉嗬，倒佢落去，
要飛幾耐啊？
好快脆啊！雞肉好快脆熟嘅啫，
點樣知係熟啊？
嗱浮起嚟得㗎啦，轉色啦嗱。
Mix around the chopsticks to prevent the pieces of chicken from sticking together. We'll blanch the chicken until they turn white. Around 80 seconds will do. This leads us into our fifth healthy cooking tweak.
One clever thing I thought my dad did was blanching. Can you talk about that?
Well, I think blanching in general is healthy and it also seals in your nutrients and it's also a time saver. Another perspective is you don't need to stir fry or fry things with as much oil. And maybe that's what your dad was going for. I really appreciate him for doing that. And I really want to see how your family reacted to eating it because that's probably something they hadn't been used to, like flavor-wise or texture-wise, right?
Yeah, I mean, it tasted just as good. I mean, we made like two of like typical takeout classics, like cashew chicken, stir-fried broccoli, potato beef. But those were all blanched first. I mean, he usually does that with vegetables, but I hadn't seen him do it with meat first.
Another pro tip, try to use a glass lid so you can tell when the chicken is done. We're blanching the chicken to about 80 to 90% doneness since we'll be stir frying everything later. Also, blanching is ideally done at a higher heat for a shorter amount of time, so you retain more moisture and develop the ideal textures.
嗱佢嚇。
Allow the excess water to drain, then transfer the chicken to a bowl. If you don't already have a spider strainer, it's probably one of the most unsung heroes in my dad's kitchen. Without it, you'd either have to pour out all the boiling water into a colander and reboil more water to blanch the veggies, or slowly ladle everything out, which would lead to some overcooked chicken.
呢個時候咧就飛呢啲菜啊，撇少少油上去，
Add 2 teaspoons of oil to the water.
靚啲啊，撇少少鹽上去，
The oil and salt help give the veggies more shimmer and vibrancy.
兩個茶匙，好啦。
Now we'll add the celery, carrot, and red bell pepper into the wok. Let the vegetables cook for about 80 seconds with the stove still set on high heat. In general, it's much more efficient to cook multiple dishes at once than it is to cook one dish at a time, as long as you understand the general process. Here's an excerpt from one of our courses about how my dad approaches cooking family-style meals like this. We'll divide the cooking into 3 phases. Phase 1 is pre-cooking, and it encompasses all ingredient preparation. Phase 2 is long cooking, which involves cooking items over a longer period of time. And Phase 3 is fast cooking, which consists of cooking items quickly over high heat. To clarify, we coined the terms long cooking and fast cooking for easier understanding.
如果你煮幾個餸咧，你點樣決定做邊啲方法先啊？
咁你就計算時間啦，燜、炒、焗、炸啊，次序嚟做。湯咧就梗係先㗎啦，但係焗咧時間長，焗先，最好就焗先。煮飯時間長就煮飯先。你選擇嗰啲時間最長啲嘅咧，就做佢先，開火先。炒嘅時間就短啲嘅，咁你最後先至煮。嗱，滾啦。
Now we'll use a spider strainer to transfer the blanched vegetables to a bowl.
You覺得係咪一定要有手呢啊？
要就呢咪快啲咯，係嘛？方便啲啦，做工啊。蘑菇入咗落去，切碎碎嘅。
全部啲菜嚟飛。
要。
腰果唔要唔要？
腰果唔使，腰果熟㗎啦。OK。
My dad's covering the wok and blanching the mushrooms for about a minute. This leads us to our 6th tweak. Add seasoning towards the end of cooking.
So that's the other tweak. Season after you're done cooking, because the first thing that hits your taste buds are what's on top of the food. As you chew, your taste buds are already saturated. So it's already happy. It tastes good. So you just keep eating and it's fine. And if you dunked a piece of the same thing in oil and fried it, yeah, you'll get the same mouthfeel. But then when you're done, your mouth is greasy, your lips are greasy, right? So, and do you really need that? No.
咩？蘑菇好容易熟嘅啫嘛。
呢啲係咪80成熟定係100成熟？而家係咪全部熟晒啦？
係啊。
你再炒會唔會？
再炒咪落啲味啫嘛，柯羅都熟㗎啦。炒就好快脆咯。跟住咧，西芥蘭飛水。
如果係淨係有一個鑊咧，係咪可唔可以用煲做晒啲飛水？
我都係用一隻鑊啫嘛。
哦，你唔會換鑊啊？
就係呢個我就煮晒㗎啦。啊，就係呢個鑊我就煮晒㗎啦。
We'll cook the broccoli with the lid on.
趁呢個時間咧，再少少生粉水嚟炒呢個西芥蘭同埋呢個腰果雞。OK。
幾多啊？
一個茶匙生粉。一個湯匙水。
I just want to highlight again how much of a game changer blanching is in your kitchen. It's easy, low maintenance, saves cooking time, requires little cleanup, saves you from using a bunch of oil, preserves more color and nutrients, and it also acts as an extra wash to remove dirt and bacteria.
而家有冇壓力啊？
冇，有冇壓力就我好普通啲菜啫嘛仔。
Blanching is also a very helpful technique in what some people call par cooking, short for partial cooking, which is a common technique in meal prep, restaurants, and the processed food industry. My dad almost always does some sort of par cooking for stir fries, since the component ingredients all require different cooking times to arrive at the perfect texture. Blanching each ingredient independently allows us to dial in the right texture for each ingredient before mixing everything together in a stir fry.
Đó, đó. Cuốn đây.
個西嘅話要唔要落啲啊？
你落少少，得㗎啦。OK， 好啦，攞佢。
After cooking the broccoli for just under 3 minutes, we'll transfer them out.
點解用呢個流啊？
停水啦嘛，炒起上嚟佢咪唔會咁多水喺度咯，係嘛？倒水啊！
With the stir fry ingredients now partially cooked, my dad is now emptying out the wok. Now we'll place the wok back on the stove and bring it up to temperature with the heat on high.
好啦，而家炒西芥蘭先，嗬，
唔使抹乾啊？
再開猛唔嚇，
唔使抹乾啊？
唔使
The heat from the stove will eventually dry the water in the wok.
得㗎啦。嗱，呢個湯匙舀上去，
When the oil is shimmering, it's hot enough to start stir frying the aromatics.
薑蓉、蒜蓉，
Cook the minced garlic and ginger until they're fragrant. About 25 seconds will do. We'll give the broccoli a quick stir, then start incorporating the flavors.
少少，啲湯匙，啲茶匙裝，OK， 呢個茶湯匙 ，OK，
Stir and let the broccoli cook for another 20 seconds. You could also pre-mix these flavors in a bowl and throw it in all at once. If you are going to add them as you cook, just make sure you have everything laid out near the stove, a technique called mise en place. My dad is draining the water from the plate before plating the broccoli.
唔使再加大鹽。
唔使，啲少少鹽啫，半個茶匙，半茶匙糖，生板。
Mix the slurry before pouring it into the wok. If you can't toss the wok like my dad, stirring with a spatula also works. We'll cook this for another 30 seconds to let the slurry thicken.
Chắc là你試下。嗱，嚇，
哦，好熱啊！
嚇，
好熱，好熱。
好啦，洗洗鑊先嗱。
With the stir-fried broccoli plated, my dad is giving the wok a quick rinse before cooking our last dish.
What are your recommendations about around like cooking with oil?
The healthiest oils are basically oils that are liquid at room temperature, and the least healthy are the oils that are solid at room temperature. And the king of healthy oils has always been olive oil. And then the second best is actually canola oils. So I would say if you're just doing light stir fry, you're not like deep frying, those would be the oils that you would choose because they don't tolerate a super high temperature smoke point.
And that's the final healthy tweak of this video. Use olive or canola oil for most of your cooking needs. There are lots of other ways to eat healthy, but the 7 tweaks we put forth in this video are effective and easy starting points. We'll recap all of them again at the end. For our cashew chicken ingredients, we'll also want to do a quick drain of any water that's seeped out after blanching.
好啦，隻鑊就夠熱啦，俾油，啲湯匙油。 薑蒜，
而家係猛火。
開猛火，梗係啦。
We'll stir fry the aromatics on high heat until they're fragrant. About 25 seconds should do the trick.
好鮮味。得。
Now we'll throw in all the vegetables, including the carrots, celery, red bell peppers, and mushrooms. Cook these for about 25 seconds. Next, we'll add a dash of cooking wine and give everything a toss. Add in the pieces of chicken and toss again.
Nữa Quân con Quân chờ chị nó thò Quân chờ chị gì Cái số chiếc một chút khoảng sao vậy Bây giờ đó Còn cái sang phản水
We'll let the ingredients cook for about a minute. In the meantime, we'll prepare the slurry.
一個湯一個茶匙，咁大碟餸俾2個茶匙先得。OK， 一個湯匙嘅水。
你平時煮嘢有冇一碗水喺度？
咩碗水啊？唔使，我屋企方便啦，唔使㗎，呢度方便啊嘛。
After pouring in the slurry, we have to stir quickly to avoid clumps forming. We'll cook this for a final 20 seconds until the sauce thickens.
Nếu có mẹ cái lâu mà chỉ cái nếu có咁上上去咋？
哇！42分鐘
嚇？
你想點？42分鐘要煮完晒。
OK。嗱，你試一試唔夠味先嗱。
Wow, that's beautiful. Hang on. How's it? 夠鹹。
咩嘛？
好鮮味啊！
嚇？
好鮮味啊！
咩啊？
Wow.
Now the final thing to do is plate everything up.
What do you hope people get out of this video?
I hope people get enough information that they can make healthier choices for themselves. You know, it's not easy. We don't expect everybody just like jump on the bandwagon and do everything exactly right every meal. They might only have a little bit of time or a little bit of reserve, but I would hope people watch this and have a mindfulness or a consciousness about what they're putting in their body and really think about it the next time they're getting ready to eat or even while they're eating. And hopefully we plant the seed of future health.
As we plate everything, I want to invite you to challenge you to try recreating this meal this week, even if it takes you longer than the 42 minutes it took my dad to complete it. If you do, we'd love to hear about it in the comments. As a recap, the 7 simple tweaks we talked about are to blend your rice with other grains and or legumes, move closer to meals that are 50% vegetables, 25% proteins, and 25% whole grains, use fresh ingredients, be mindful of how much starch you're using, blanch your ingredients, season towards the end of your cooking, and finally, to use olive or canola oil for most of your cooking needs. Even if you just incorporate one of these healthy tweaks, the benefits will be immense. And as with most things, knowing is just the first step. The real benefits come when you practice them regularly, when they become habits. And as the Chinese New Year sayings go, we wish you and your family San Tai Gin Hong and Cheng Ming Bak Sui, wishing you good health and that you live a long life, or literally to 100 years old. Thanks again to Asian Health Services and also to the National Association of Community Health Centers Innovation Incubator, powered by Abbott, for making this project possible. And with that, our 50-minute challenge is complete. With a few minutes to spare, my dad cooked cashew chicken, egg drop soup, stir-fried broccoli, and steamed white and brown rice, all in about 45 minutes.
好，朋友們，呢個健康晚餐做好咗啦，45分鐘做好咗啊，好簡單，健康又有營養嘅晚餐，希望大家中意嚇。
Wow. Oh my goodness, that's crazy.
45分鐘。
That's crazy.
誒
Crazy.
菜。
Yeah.
YouTube thinks you'll like this recipe next. Let's see if they're right. A huge thank you to our wok stars and all of our chefs in the CANTO Cooking Club.